question 1, we're being told that Sam and Jeremy have ages that are consecutive odd integers. The product of their ages is 783. And we're being asked which equation here could be used to find Jeremy's age, J, if he's a younger man. Okay, so first I need to think about consecutive odd integers. So if Jeremy is the younger man, then that would mean that the next consecutive odd integer would be J plus 2. Now we're talking about product. So if I show the product, that means multiplication. So that would be J times J plus 2. And they're telling me it is 783. Now, this is an equation I could use to find J, but if you notice out of my 4 choices, that's not an option. So I'm going to start to distribute the J. So if I distribute, I get J squared plus 2J is equal to 783, and this is choice 3 for question 1. Question 2. It's telling me 9x squared minus 81 is equal to 0, so then what would the solution set be? So we're looking for our roots of this quadratic equation. So 9x squared minus 81 is the difference of 2 squares. So if I factor that, I get 3x, 3x plus 9, 3x minus 9 is equal to 0. And now I can solve. So I end up with 3x plus 9 is equal to 0. Subtract 9, and I get 3x is equal to negative 9, which if I divide by 3, I get x is equal to negative 3. If I go to my second factor, 3x minus 9 is equal to 0, add the 9, I get 3x is equal to positive 9, and when I divide by 3 here, I get x is equal to positive 3. So I get 2 solutions of 3 and negative 3, which is choice 4. Okay. Question 3, we're being told that the roots of our equation are negative 8, and positive 1. So what could be the function? Okay, well that means that x is equal to negative 8 and x is equal to positive 1. So if I want to get this back in terms of the factors, I need to get these both equal to 0. So x plus 8 is equal to 0. And if I subtract 1, I get x minus 1 is equal to 0. So these are my 2 factors that when multiplied together give me my equation, and this would be choice 2. The function g of x is equal to x plus 8 times x minus 1. For number 4, we're given the graph of a quadratic, and it's asking us what the zeros are of this equation. So remember, zeros, another word for that is roots or x-intercepts. So I'm looking at the values at which the graph is crossing the x-axis. So I can see 1 here. This is where x is equal to 1. It's going to go over to x equaling 5. I see another 0, so the choice 3 shows both of those solutions.
Okay, so let's take a look at question 5. So we have the equation for the volume of a square pyramid. V equals 1/3 v squared times h. And we want to solve for the positive value of b. So we want to get the b of the whole. First thing we're going to do is get rid of the coefficient of a third on the right-hand side by multiplying the left to the right-hand side by the reciprocal. So a third times 3 just gives 1. So now I have 3v equals v squared h. I want to get the b alone. So since it's attached to the h by multiplication, I'm going to divide by h. So now I have 3v divided by h equals b squared. So to undo squaring, I need to square root. And they told me they wanted the positive solution, so it would be b equals the square root of 3v divided by h, which is choice 3. Taking a look at question 6. Doritos cost $1.50. Then a bottle of water costs $2. So David has $19 to spend, and he buys 10 bags of chips. That means he buys 10 bags of Doritos. So the Doritos amount should be multiplied by $1.50. So when I'm looking at my choices, I can immediately eliminate choices 3 and 4 because the wrong value, the bottle of water value, is being multiplied by the 10. Okay. Now I have to use the fact that I know that maximum means that amount or less. So this is the inequality sign that means maximum, so question 6 should have been choice 1. Taking a look at question 7, what's the equation that passes through this point is a slope of negative 4/3. So if I'm talking about a line, I know I'm talking about y equals mx plus b. Here I need to find the slope and I need to find the y-intercept. So they tell me the slope, but I'm not sure what the y-intercept is. So I need to solve for the y-intercept. So to solve for the y-intercept, I'm going to take this point and plug 3 in for x and negative 7 in for y. So negative 7 equals 4 over 3 times my x value plus b. So when I simplify, I get that b would have to be negative 3. So therefore, the correct equation should be choice 2, where the y-intercept is negative 3 and the slope is negative 4/3. Taking a look at question, a rectangular garden measures 8 feet by 12 feet. We're increasing the area by the garden field by 10%. You will do this by increasing the length and the width by the same amount. Okay. So we know that the area so far is 12 times 8, which is 96. We're increasing the garden of the field, which really means the area by 10%. So I take 96 and I multiply it by 0.10, and I add that amount to my original. So 96 plus 9.6. I really get 105.6. So my new area should be 105.6. And that's when I'm increasing the dimensions by the same amount on the side. So if I don't know the amount, I'm going to call that amount x. So to get my equation, I know area is length times width. 8 plus x times 12 plus x should equal 105.6. That would be choice 4.
Okay, for question 9, they're showing us the graph of y equals f of x, and they're asking which point could be used to find f of negative 1. So what that means is that the x value here is equal to negative 1. So I'm going to go on my x-axis, and over here at negative 1, I see that the point associated with that is D. So point D, choice 4, would be used to find f of negative 1. For question 10, which graph represents the solution of the system of inequalities? I first need to look at each inequality and see if I can identify which solution that would be. So for the first one, I have y is greater than or equal to x plus 3. So I'm looking at a y-intercept of positive 3 and a slope of positive 1. So if you look at all 4 graphs, that's this line. Okay, and I also have y is less than or equal to negative 2x minus 2, so that's a y-intercept of negative 2 and a slope of negative 2 over 1, and again, that would be my second. So now I really need to narrow this down based on the shading. So if I look at my first inequality here, if I'm going to test the point 0, 0, is 0 greater than or equal to 0 plus 3? So is 0 greater than or equal to 3? Well, no, that's false. So for this inequality, I should be shading away from 0, 0. So that would be here, here, and then you can see on this graph, I also have it here. But on graphs 3 and 4, they're shading above. So now I can narrow it down a little bit. Let me use a different color here for this. Sorry about that, guys. I got a little confused with my colors. So here, now I color coordinated both of our systems. Okay, so for the blue graph, I need to make sure that I'm shading away from 0, 0, so that would be above my blue line. So you can see in choice 2, it's shading below. In choice 3, it's shading below. But in choice 4, it is shading above. So we can still narrow it down now between 1 and 4. If I plug in 0, 0 for the second inequality, is 0 less than or equal to negative 2 times 0 minus 2. That simplifies to being is 0 less than or equal to negative 2, which is also false. So I should be shading away from 0, 0 on my second inequality as well. You can see that's happening in choice 1, but it's not happening in choice 4. So the answer here is choice 1.
Okay, taking a look at question 11, you want to solve by factors. You should notice the coefficient of the m squared is 2, which means you're going to have to solve by tricky trim. So for tricky trim, you're going to multiply the coefficient of the squared term times the constant term, like negative 18. So we're trying to think of factors of negative 18 that add up to the 3. So it would be 6 times negative 3. So now that you know what those factors are, you're going to take your first term and bring it down. Take your last term and bring it down. And split your term up into two equivalent terms, positive 6m, negative, because positive 6m, negative 3m really equals your original of 3m. It's just now that you have an equation with 4 terms on the left side instead of 3, which is going to allow you to factor by grouping. So you're going to put your dividing line in between your two terms and factor out a GCF on the left, which would be 2m. And the parentheses to make this true would be an m plus 3. On the right-hand side, the GCF between negative 3m and negative 9 would be negative 3. Also in the parentheses would be m plus 3. So now we can write this as 2m minus 3 times m plus 3 equals 0. And you want to solve. So 2m minus 3 equals 0. So to solve that, I would add 3 and then divide by 2. So m equals 1.5 or 3 halves. And then here, m plus 3 equals 0. To make that 0, m would have to be negative. So two answers should have been m equals 3 over 2, or m equals negative 3. Taking a look at question 12, first you had to write two equations based upon the questions. Well, two equations should have been c equals 10m plus 100. And c equals 20m plus 20. You had to use c as your y value, which represents the cost, and m for your x value, which represents the months. And then you need to graph these two functions. So I'm going to start with this first function here. So I know my y-intercept is 100, and my slope is 10. But notice the boxes on the y-axis are going up by 10. The boxes on the x-axis are going up by 1. So really, going up one box, over one box to draw oops, what? I'm going to use the line tool because it looks like the smartboard is not calibrated so great. It's a little bit more precise. I'm going to label my line. I can actually draw an arrow to it. Now I'm going to graph my second equation. So I'm starting at a y-intercept of 20, and I'm going up 20 over 1. So I'm plotting a point every up 2 boxes over 1 box. Line in. Label it. This equation here. They asked me which one Josie's plus will equal Ron's cross, so I want to see where the graphs cross, and see that would be right here. So then I'm going to look down to the x-axis, and you would have to state 8 at 8 months, or month 8 if you wanted to say. You could say that
Okay, for question 13, we need to set up an equation because we're being asked to determine algebraically the dimensions of this soccer field. The first thing I would do is set up a rectangle here, and they're telling me that the rectangular soccer field has an area of 6,000 and that the field must be 40 yards longer than its width. So the length must be 40 yards longer than the width, so we can label the width x and our length x plus 40, and they tell me the area is 6,000. So since I know area is length times width, I'm going to set up my equation. X times x plus 40 is equal to 6,000. And now I want to get it into standard form so I can try to solve this through factoring. So x times x gives me x squared plus 40x is equal to 6,000. I want to get it equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract the 6,000 to the other side of my equation. And I get the quadratic in standard form, that is x squared plus 40x minus 6,000 is equal to 0. So this is where you have to look for something that multiplies to negative 6,000 and adds to positive 40, and these numbers came out to be 100 and negative 60. When you solve from these factors, you ask yourself what values for x here would make the factor 0. This would be a negative 100, And for this factor, it would be a positive 60. Now, because we're talking about dimensions of a soccer field, we can't have a negative measurement, so we're going to reject the negative 100. So 60 is going to be our width. So if you want, you could label it here on your diagram, and then 60 plus 40 gives us a length of 100, but you did have to find both dimensions in order to get full credit. In question 14, we're being told that the total amount of money that John and Sarah are saving are being represented by two functions. So f of x is representing the total amount of money John is saving, g of x is representing the total amount of money that Sarah is saving, and we're being asked after how many weeks x will they have the same amount of money saved. Okay, so if I set f of x equal to g of x and solve for x, I can figure out how many weeks it's going to take them to have the same amount of money. So if we take 60 plus 5x, set it equal to x squared plus 46. Now again, I have a quadratic equation. I know this because I have the x squared, so I want to get it into standard form. So I'm going to start by subtracting over my constant, and then subtract the 5x. I get x squared minus 5x minus 14 is equal to 0. So again, this is tram, so I'm asking myself what multiplies to negative 14 and adds to negative 5, and that's going to be a negative 7 and a positive 2. Okay, so now I need to solve both factors. So here, if x is equal to 7, that factor would be equal to 0. And on this factor, if x is equal to negative 2, the factor would be equal to 0. Now, I'm talking about x representing how many weeks. So I can't have a negative amount of weeks, so I'm going to reject the negative 2, and I'm going to take 7 as my solution. And now the most important part, really, to make sure that you finish this question is to read through to the end of the question. And it asks me to explain how I arrived at my answer. So by saying after 7 weeks, this is my answer, and maybe saying I set the two equations equal to each other and solve for x. But you did have to give an explanation of the steps you took to solve for x in order to get full credit.